What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Stephen Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt practice report after day 5 of spring ball for the Panthers. They were back, their second practice back from spring break, and just want to run through a couple of things that I noticed just kind of walking around practice, hearing from some players. We got a long list of guys. We talked to defensive coordinator Randy Bates, offensive lineman Branson Taylor, wide receiver Kenny Johnson, linebacker Kyle Lewis, and linebacker Rasheem Biles. A really loaded day of interviews today. But, walking around practice, I think the first thing I kind of noticed is that this offense is still a work in progress, which shouldn't exactly come as a surprise. But as I'm watching, it's clear that there's some timing patterns that are off. The quarterbacks aren't always putting the ball in the best spot for their receivers not always running the right routes, running backs, the timing is just a little off. It's not huge things, it's little details there. And offensive coordinator Cade Bell was really active, trying to point things out and say, "Hey, you need to be here. You need to do this. You need to go and do that." He's being very intentional and he's having to be very hands on early. Again, that doesn't surprise me much, but it did remind me of a quote that Pat Narduzzi gave on Tuesday, and I'll read it for you right here. Quote: "I don't see many growing pains right now with our offense as I saw last year in spring ball and fall camp. I think our offensive staff is doing a heck of a job coaching. I think the players are buying into the scheme, and I think they're having fun out there. And they're making plays. There's a lot more production on the field that I see. I see getting the ball in playmakers' hands, giving them the opportunity to make plays in space, and spreading you out a little bit. So I don't see the growing pains that you maybe think we would after 4," he said games, but I think he meant practices, close quote. I kind of I think that's an encouraging thing to see. And if I'm reading between the lines correctly, I think Narduzzi is trying to say, look, the concepts are working. The concepts are getting guys open. When we do go live, when we do go 11 on 11 against our defense, we're finding that guys are getting open. There are plays there to be made, and there's just a little bit of tweaking to do and a little bit of experience to get with each of these guys as they kind of warm up to what the offense is supposed to be, as they see it put together on the field. I think it's one thing to, especially in this offense where you go so fast and, you're supposed to think less at this point, and you're supposed to just kind of know off of instinct what you're supposed to do. I think it makes sense to see players kind of uh, get try to get the speed down first before they kind of master the offense. We've heard that from Cade Bell. We've heard it from JJ Laster, the new wide receivers coach. They said that they want the guys to get used to the tempo first. They're going to be more forgiving about mistakes as far as schematic things go, as long as these guys get the nuts and bolts of running the actual of getting up to the pace down. It is an unnaturally fast pace. It is 8 to 12 seconds in between snaps, and listening to Branson Taylor, listening to Kenny Johnson, it's been tough on them at first. It is a big swing to go from a more methodical scheme like Frank Signetti ran. And I mean, even when you think about Mark Whipple, what he was running, that was a high scoring offense, but they weren't moving particularly fast. It wasn't, go, go, go right from the jump. Those guys huddled. They did maybe have tempo at times, but it was a downfield passing offense that also took their time a little bit. So for a guy like Branson Taylor, who is now on his third offensive coordinator, this is a radically new system that is not only throwing it deep, but also moving quickly, that not only has the quick hitters as well and is trying to get guys out in space. Um, it's just interesting to at this point in spring camp kind of get a feel for what everyone's feeling, and that's that this is a work in progress a little bit. That this is new to everyone, and that the pace in particular is what they want guys to get down immediately. They need to know how fast they're going to go before they can really get the finer details down as well. I think there's definitely a difference between understanding it when you look at it in the playbook, when you see the concepts that you're supposed to be running. You see that versus, excuse me, uh, what it's supposed to look like on the field and actually doing it, and doing it with the pressure of a clock running down on you, and developing that internal clock is going to be very important for the Panthers as they move through spring ball, and they try to get this offense really nailed down. Thinking about the other side of the ball, and like I said, the as we heard from Randy Bates, the offense is really stressing, especially the defensive secondary, just throwing the ball deep, trying to challenge them, especially when you're looking at a completely new cornerbacks room. You think that um, if you're an opposing offense, if you had to play a game tomorrow, you'd probably look at that cornerback room as a little weak, as inexperienced. The Panthers feel like they have one guy who's you can at least pencil in as a starter for right now. That's Rylan Gandy, and we've heard nothing but good things really since he started at Pitt, but especially this year. A guy who's been working hard, who's waited his turn, and has learned a lot behind those three veterans: MJ Devonshire, Marquez Williams, and AJ Woods. Now he gets his turn to shine. Then there's one other cornerback spot that is wide open, that you really don't know who's going to be able to step into that spot and who's going to end up as that starter in week one. Talking to Randy Brates, he's got a bunch of candidates. You can talk about Tamarian Crumpley, a guy who I think the Panthers recognize has a bunch of talent. Again, one of those guys who's just been buried on the depth chart. He's a junior right now. Same goes for Noah Bigelow. I believe he is only a sophomore, but he has had to wait his turn as well. Taman Lynham is in from Nebraska, a transfer. Um, Randy Bates is really encouraged by what he's seen from those guys. And same goes for Rashad Battle, a guy who was injured for so much last year, but he's got two of those takeaway stickers on top of his helmet. Bates said he's grabbed a couple of interceptions and has been impressive as he gets back onto the field and gets back up to speed. He's a veteran candidate as well. So there are a lot of guys that are in the mix for this job, and I think there's going to be some separation after this weekend. The Panthers will have their first scrimmage of the spring, and that's where Bates says he's really going to see separation at a lot of positions. He's going to see how these guys react to live game situations and how they just handle the pressure of being out there on their own. It's more of a live environment. It's not real football. It's not a regular season game. But you don't have coaches out there holding your hand. You're not able to just blow the whistle and stop the play if something goes wrong. It's going to be less controlled. It's going to be less. It's going to be less practice like. It's going to be more game like. And Bates was really, really eager to see the corners and the defensive secondary in particular react to the new offense when they don't, have those safeguards against giving up a big play or those safeguards against making a mistake. So I'm looking forward to this corner competition as well. I feel like there's a bunch of good players in the mix there, and we're going to see who comes out on the other side. I'm excited to talk to the coaches next week and see who's kind of stood out in their eyes. Lynham is a guy with some long arms. He played a little bit at Nebraska and was pretty productive there. Like I said, Crumpley and Bigelow, we've heard good things about them before and just haven't seen it on the field. Are these guys ready to take that step up? And then Rashad Battle, just another one of those guys, much older, I believe a senior, who just hasn't really had an opportunity yet. The injuries didn't help him last year either, but there are big opportunities for him to take steps forward and for him to step into a new role on defense. And it seems like at least early in spring ball, he's making the most of it right now. The other thing that I'm interested to hear about when we get back, because Bates was asked about this pretty extensively, is the new communication systems that are allowed in college football. If you're familiar with the green dot in the NFL, there will be a microphone in the helmet of at least one defensive player, up to one defensive player, excuse me, and then most teams will put a microphone in the helmet of their quarterback on offense. It's interesting to hear Randy Bates talk about it because, at least for the moment, when he's going up against an up-tempo offense like Pitt has every day, they're using these microphones a little bit, but he says they're relying a lot more on hand signals. He's talked to NFL guys around the league and around the country who've been using this technology for a long time, and they say, it's tough to, when you're facing an up-tempo offense, get to use the microphones effectively, because sometimes it can overload whoever you're talking to. They need to be on the field. They need to be reacting to what they see. And if you're talking to them too much, you're kind of clouding their vision, you're clouding their head, and they're not able to read and react and make plays as much. Not every team is going to be, a K-Bell offense that's snapping the ball every 8 to 12 seconds. In fact, most of the teams in college football aren't going to be like that, especially most of the teams that Pitt plays. But it'll just be interesting to see how these communications devices are used, how they're stressed, and how Pitt reacts to them. I mean, do they like them? I mean, it was a move made after the Michigan stealing scandal. I think most coaches agree that it's a good way to prevent sign stealing. But as Bates points out, I mean, you're not always able to use it in that way. Sometimes the scenario, the offense, the opponent that you're playing against dictates that you can't use those. So that's another thing I'm looking out for this weekend, and looking forward to talking to Pitt's coaches when we get back about how they use those things. Another interesting note: Bates said this weekend he won't be the one talking in. Brandon George is penciled in as your starting middle linebacker right now. He won't be the one in Brandon George's ears. They're going to let linebackers coach Ryan Manelek do that for now and kind of feel it out, and then see what it's like and go from there. So a lot of experimentation. It's an interesting new wrinkle to college football. It'll certainly be talked about a lot, and this is kind of the first trial run for the Panthers as they put this into live action. Kind of want to wrap this up by talking about the receivers. Not a group that we've really touched on a whole lot, mostly because it seems pretty set. You've got your top three guys. I mean, they seem pretty obvious right now. You've got basically three starters coming back. Dejon Reynolds started a bunch last year. Kenny Johnson was inserted as a starter a lot last year, and then Kanate Mumpfield, of course, is in there as well. Um, like I said, your top guys are pretty much accounted for. But that's the thing about this kind of up tempo offense is that you're going to be able to mix in a bunch of guys. You're going to have opportunities to, and I think they want to. They want to make sure legs are fresh when you're moving that quickly. It's not always easy to have guys out there playing 90% of the snaps or 85% of the snaps. The Panthers are going to need some depth, and my question is really where it's going to come from. I feel like there are a lot of candidates, there are a lot of bodies, but who is really going to separate there? And that's what I'm most eager to know coming back from this scrimmage. I mean, will it be one of those four freshmen that were recruited last year? Excuse me, one of those three freshmen with, they recruited four freshmen, Johnson kind of already in the mix as a starter, but, will it be a Zion Fowler who, seems like a great athlete, maybe a little smaller than guys like Dejon Reynolds or even Kenny Johnson, but has some explosive athletic ability and some good hands. He's been a deep ball threat. We've seen a little bit throughout camp. Lamar Seymour, he's got some speed coming from South Florida. Is he a guy that's going to step up? And Izzy Polk, we heard a lot about him last year. They were cautious with how they were using him. They wanted to maintain a red shirt, but they thought that he was good enough to maybe get in the lineup. So those four guys are all candidates, but you also think about Che Nabuko. He's got some speed as well, track star speed, Olympic speed that could get inserted in there. You think about Raphael Williams, a guy who knows the offense, coming from Western Carolina and also San Diego State, a little smaller as well, 5'10", 165 listed on his roster right here, but he's a candidate as well. And CJ Lee, another smaller guy, 5'11", 175, but knows the offense, knows the Western Carolina, the Cade Bell system, and could be a candidate as well. I think there are a lot of options here, and they're going to need some of these guys to really step up because it you're gonna get thinner just naturally because, or not thinner, you're gonna be stressed and your depth is gonna be tested because of how fast that this group is going to play. I mean, I'm sure Kenny Johnson and Dejon Reynolds and Mumpfield are in great shape, but you're definitely gonna need some depth there, and you're gonna need guys who are able to step in and competently run the offense at that speed and make sure that you're not skipping a beat when you get to game day and when you need a sub like that. I will also say I'm encouraged by the top line receivers. I think their skill sets are going to fit pretty well into this offense. Kanate Mumpfield is trying to become a bit more of a do-it-all guy. He's been playing some more outside. He's told us he wants to get some more of those deep balls and expand his game, and the Panthers are allowing him to do that. They think he can really be a weapon. Kenny Johnson told us today that he thinks opposing defenses are going to have to double Mumpfield a lot, and that he doesn't personally see anyone in the country who's going to be able to keep up with Mumpfield. I think Dejon Reynolds is going really underrated in this offense. I feel like he's a big, strong possession receiver that made a bunch of plays last year when I'll admit I didn't expect much from him coming into Pitt, and he really impressed me, especially late in the season. And then Kenny Johnson has the speed, of course, to really make the most of an offense that's putting him in space. So I think those guys are really interesting. And I think those guys are leading a group that, I'd say it has depth, but we need to know what kind of depth. Is it real quality depth, or is it just a bunch of bodies doing the same thing. That's the interesting thing that I think we need to look out for this weekend, and that'll be one of the things I'm interested to hear about when the Panthers come back from the weekend and we get to talk to them one more time. On that note, I'm headed out of here. Thank you all so much for tuning into an Inside Pitt post-game practice report, excuse me, after day 5 of spring ball for the Pitt Panthers. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers, and follow all the reporting at InsideThePanthers.com. Like I said, appreciate you all tuning in, and I'll see you next time.